Welcome to the Map It Forward podcast, everyone. Today's episode of the podcast is brought to you by, unfortunately, the bushfires that are happening in Australia. What we are looking to do is to raise money for the bushfires, and we would love for you to head to the show notes and click on the sponsor links so that you can see where you can donate. If you are a business that has been affected by the bushfires, we would love for you to get in contact with us and let us know what your needs are so that we can help out as best we can. There's an army of people waiting to help. If you're in Australia on the 17th of January, please visit a 5 Senses Cafe. They are donating $1 from every cup of coffee to various bushfire appeals around the country. These fires have been really devastating and they've really hit the coffee community, so we want to help out as best we can. Today, joining me on the Map It Forward is a wonderful leader in our industry, Darrin Daniel. Hi, Darrin.
Hello. Hi. We
actually met in Australia, going on 2 years ago now.
That's right.
That's crazy. Darrin, you are from ACE, the Alliance for the Excellence of Coffee. Have I said that correctly?
Yeah, Alliance for Coffee Excellence. Yeah.
Alliance for Coffee Excellence. I'm used to just thinking of you as from Cup of Excellence.
Right. We own and operate Cup of Excellence. It's kind of a nonprofit kind of umbrella effect. So, yeah.
I got to say, it was really fun stalking your history. You are a very interesting cat, sir.
Okay.
And why I say that is because you have been in the coffee industry since 1995, right?
85, 86.
85.
Yeah. Started as a barista here in the Northwest in Eugene, Oregon. So, yeah.
If you had to, I was writing a blog post yesterday about what the coffee industry, I think, is going to look like and how it's going to transition over the next 10 years. And I think that it's going to look super different than it currently does now. What did it look like in 85? I was not ready to be in the workforce in that year.
Yeah, it's a great first question because I'm actually writing a piece for a South Korean basil-based roastery about just that, the market in the mid 80s, where the market was, and then a little bit about where I was at within that history. And as far as specialty, that time, at least on the West Coast, was just an emerging kind of proposition of specialty. You had Starbucks in 71 officially starting, and I think Torrefazione was around 88 in Seattle. So Seattle was kind of happening. Portland was definitely K&F and other small retail-based companies and roasteries were emerging. And then the company I worked for in Eugene, Coffee Corner, began around 77. And they were really unique in that they actually had a lot of single origin coffees. And that was something that was very hard to find other than what George was doing on the East Coast with Coffee Connection. But there were little...
And by George, we mean George Howell,
for
anyone who doesn't know.
Yeah, who was, obviously kind of taking the mission out on the East Coast to kind of bring specialty and higher quality coffees and better service, better cafe service. Just that whole proposition. There certainly were other companies in other cities in the U.S. that were emerging and doing their thing. But to me, in writing the piece that I'm working on now, I just thought how playful the industry was at that point, because there really was there was nothing to define it. So we were just kind of making it up as we were going, I guess, in a way, which was kind of exciting. And, the company that I worked for at that time in the U.S. was kind of going through a little bit of a recession, mid 80s. And it was very fortunate to have a job as a barista, to be a waiter or a barista and just coming out of high school. It was kind of a prized job to have and good tips. And
really?
So, yeah. I definitely was very happy to have landed that job and got very lucky to get in. And we had a pooled house of tips, but we made good money. We had a very, very busy location. We were right in the center of kind of the the thriving part of Eugene, Oregon, near government buildings and state buildings, and kind of a hip area called the Fifth Street Public Market at that time, and a lot of countercultural people hanging out. And people were into it. They were asking a lot of questions about where our coffees are coming from, and we had a really great tea selection. And so, yeah, to me, it was exciting. We had retail, and then we did whole bean sales. So most of the staff had to be pretty knowledgeable to even work on the whole bean side to answer questions about brewing, or giving suggestions on coffees they might like, whether they liked acidity or body or things like that. So it definitely, it was probably just a very, maybe not so self-recognized at that point as it is now. And like, I think what you're maybe suggesting too, that actualization in 10 years from now, where it's going to be, how it's going to position itself is going to be really, really different. I don't know what it's going to look like.
What do you think it's going to look like?
Well, hopefully, certainly, hopefully more sustainable than it is right now. I think that's the biggest question we're all having is, how can we sustain ourselves? And I think there's a lot of very smart people in the world that are gonna be able to hopefully engage the sustainability question and ensure that there's proper growth along the whole supply chain.
When you say sustainability, do you mean the supply chain of coffee or the other end of the value chain?
Probably equal sprinkling of both.
Nice.
Yeah.
Thanks for clarifying that. It's just that people say coffee sustainability, and it seems to be that thing that's so undefined, like specialty coffee.
Yeah. Yeah. Or innovation in coffee. Like what's that mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, or in the world that I'm in now, impact is the word that I find myself using a lot, and they're all kind of buzzwords and kind of becoming somewhat of a cliche, but they do have some meaning. They do matter, and
For sure.
and yeah, and I think to me, there's the environmental part of the sustainability thing, but there's the financial and the economic, and I think that's the one that we're all from barista to farmer, the whole thing, and trying to really get that message out there that it has to be equally distributed for the whole thing to work, and right now it's not.
It's so interesting that you say that. Like I feel like I really stumbled onto something that I'm ashamed I didn't stumble onto much earlier in my career in coffee, which is the coffee price. Now we call it a coffee price crisis, but before that it was just coffee pricing. Mm-hmm. And we weren't talking about it as much as we have been in the last year. And in going into that endeavor, I decided to go on a quest of like, who's making all the money in coffee? Mm-hmm. And I got to tell you, the one thing I've realized is I don't think it's at all easy to answer that question. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I think it's different based on what your business model is like, where your integrity standards lie. I think there's definitely different ways to make lots of money, but where are you willing to bend the rules? How long-sighted is your vision? Are you looking at like, I want to be in this for decades? And if you are, well, you're not going to get anywhere from screwing farmers over. You're not going to get anywhere from screwing your employees over. But this doesn't, the model that we've got, cafes are making on average between 3 to 5% net profit annually. Mm-hmm. That's not sustainable. Baristas are barely living on the poverty line. That's not sustainable. The coffee price crisis is making it so that farmers are cutting down their trees or feeling like they have to go and get loans at 50% interest rates. That's not sustainable either. We've got climate shifting happening that's making it difficult and more challenging to grow coffee in different regions. That's not sustainable. I mean, it doesn't, I don't think it's hopeless by any stretch. I just think there's going to be, to use a buzzword, a lot of innovation that's going to happen and out of necessity. Do you agree?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the redistribution, which was not occurring in whether it was tea, still, cacao, coffee, that they're these are the commodified realities of money not being distributed
Right.
equally or adequately, and now we're talking about it, and we're talking about it because we're in crisis.
Right.
So,
Which is the way it goes, right?
Yes, and so if the market goes back up to 260, that's great, but it's not necessarily going to take care of the systemic issue that's at hand. And I don't know if it's a capitalist conversation or capitalism in general, or if it's subsidies and how they would work in other commodified products that we all know happen. And but the ethical issue is the bigger thing, which just poses the idea that the most important thing that you're sourcing is what's driving your business. You're paying the least for, comparatively, probably. I mean, other than milk, which has certainly been an issue too in terms of prices and other things like that are contributing to your business prospering and moving forward. And I've always found that interesting that the thing that's the most important is the thing that people tend to kind of not know a lot about. CEOs of coffee companies that I've seen and know that somebody else takes care of that. Somebody takes, just get the price where it needs to be,
Right.
instead of understanding, that price might triple because of the things we're doing now as an industry. And, it's a little bit, I'd say, somewhat out of control. Like, we can't really find a balancing point. And I don't, I think in what I'm doing now and seeing the programs that we put into place, we are a very small organization, and we try to do as much as we can to identify and reward farmers, and hope that becomes a catalyst for other things for them, and leverage, right? That gives them leverage. But right now, the leveraging is totally disproportionate. Yeah. So I agree with your comments. Definitely. Yeah. Definitely.
I'm not someone who wants to blame capitalism. I think that capitalism, if done consciously, can be an incredible tool for driving innovation and driving competition and helping the industry move in the way that it needs to move.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think the problem is that the people that are making decisions, and we're not just talking about the specialty side of things here, because that's not really going to move the needle in the direction that we want. We need big change being made, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you think the people that are making the decisions are deliberately ignorant, or as a consequence of the kind of capitalism that they're engaging in, their ignorance is a consequence of that?
Yeah, it's like a laissez-faire, just we've always done it this way mentality, I think. And so that is a form of ignorance, because it's everything's fine right now. We're doing good in our bubble.
Not.
Yeah.
Their bubble may be right. Okay.
Yeah, in their bubble. And so that's a human nature issue too. I think that people just tend to ward off change in general because it's painful, but
the world's moving at a different pace now.
Yeah, it's becoming a holistic question of existing as an industry, as a culture. It poses some really big questions that I think people tend to be afraid to engage, and also because if you think you don't have any answer or anything to contribute, it's just better to just kind of keep your head in the sand and just pretend it's going to go away, or wait for some upswing or something to change. But you're right. I think that the critical mass of what's going on now is that no, we can't actually just talk about it tomorrow, or we can't wait till next year to start to figure out some of these issues. And I see it directly this year in working with NGOs and other organizations that we work with that are funded by the exports of coffee, and they are struggling because there's less coffee being exported, because there's been bigger issues in terms of production and output for a whole host of reasons. And a lot of it is climate related, if you ask farmers, or weather related, so that flowering isn't really happening. And then they're being directly impacted by their ability to support producers in the countries where they work, engage with Cup of Excellence, and ensure that it will always be part of their program. And so we're trying to be creative. But these are issues that have come up when the market is really low, and when farmers decide they don't want to grow coffee and they grow something else, or they give up altogether, and that's impacting those organizations' ability to function. So these are things that they can't say, oh, we'll figure out a way to fund and work with the COE program to make sure farmers can have access to it. So this year I've seen more of that than any of the 3 years that I've been with the organization. It's just been 3 years that I've been here, but yeah.
It sounds like the C market dropping to the lows that it has dropped to almost acts like a stress test for the value chain.
It triggers a ton of things. Yes. Yep.
So the C market goes lower, and these NGOs that you're talking about are starting to see that it's more profitable, or they're observing that the producers in their countries are noticing that it's much more profitable to grow things other than coffee.
Yeah. And I know that if you look at Colombia as an example, and the programs they're trying to put in place to move people away from coca and back to coffee, haven't really been working. And
because
I know
coca's cheap to grow.
Well, it's just much more profitable to grow, right? So and after the peace accord, what I from colleagues that I know in Colombia, they said that there was a surge of coca production after the peace accord, because FARC essentially was getting out of the business and other players were coming into the business. And some of those individuals have to be producers or one-time coffee producers. At least statistically, that's what people are saying, that there is an increase, or at least let's say a certain decrease in coffee being produced in those same communities, because it's much more profitable. It's a less labor intensive, from what I understand. And yeah, the return on the investment is quicker and faster and larger. So
More sustainable from a growing perspective?
That I don't know. I mean, I've seen a lot of production in Bolivia when I visited coffee farms that I was working with when I was a coffee buyer. And if you look at the soils, and what I've been told about how horrible it is for soil, that even to try to come back and grow coffee after you've been growing coca in those areas is very difficult. And it's a full sun crop. It's not a diversified kind of. It's a monoculture type of production. So it just completely destroys the ability to transition to other crops. So and the folks that I was working with in Bolivia were trying to get people in their community by growing coffee in that community, and they were in the Yungas area, and they just said it was an uphill battle, and one of which they said in that particular farm they lost. It's just they were surrounded by coca everywhere you looked. So that seems to be the landscape that we're in, whether it's opium poppy production or other legal crops that are being grown. There's just the proposition for coffee to be something you want your children to take on, and the next generation to be proud to be farmers and growing, is just not evident. It's not evident.
And is that a part of the sustainability problem? So it's not just from an agricultural sustainability perspective, but from a generational sustainability perspective, the handing on farms from generation to generation, that's not going to happen anymore. Well, it's going to happen less and less, right?
Yes, and I attended the Coffee Producers Forum when it launched in Colombia the first year, and we had a breakout session about how do we encourage the next generation. And it was like a 3-hour workshop on ideas and things that we could report out to the other groups that were doing other things that were kind of given to them as an assignment. And that particular group, we had a very difficult time figuring out exactly how we would encourage the next generation that would want to stay in their rural communities and grow coffee like their mother or their father have done. And in my contribution and others, I just said, it's about the money. it's not about the culture or the tradition or, that generational thing that we'd like to. It
It
sounds like a
used to mean
romantic
something,
idea.
right?
Yeah, and I'm not saying that there's not pride in growing coffee and the people that grow it, but I do. You can see the younger generation moving to the cities, looking for jobs, immigrating to other countries. The only evidence I've ever seen of a really interesting model was in Thailand, where a lot of younger people are going back to their parents' farms in northern Thailand, and the financial rewards are very good. And they're returning back from Bangkok and other cities and going back and growing coffee because they would say to me, I'm making really good money.
Yeah.
We have an internal market. We have a lot of consumption. Prices are really good internally. And they are very excited. It's the only place where I've met a farmer that was a very skilled barista, roasted his own coffee, was a coffee farmer, and was also really kind of his own export agent. And, this was just fascinating to me after seeing many, many coffee countries over the years where that never just isn't happening. And that was eye-opening to me. That was like in 2015, 14, 15. So
Yeah, Darrin, do me a favor with your headphones. Just lift the microphone off your shirt.
Oh, okay.
Perfect, thank you.
There.
The Thai thing is a really interesting one because there are a lot of Thai baristas in Sydney. I know the Sydney market very well, but there are a lot of Thai baristas in Sydney that are cultivating their careers over there and getting ready to establish supply chains of Thai coffee and of their celebrity back to Thailand. They're very revered if they can be Australian baristas and take that skill back to Thailand.
That's interesting. Yeah. And honestly, sadly, it's the only example that I have where I was just, happily shocked that there was a different model. So
Brazil's working quite a lot on establishing a local market, aren't they? Have I got that wrong?
Oh no, yeah, consumption within Brazil is going up, definitely. Yeah, quite a bit, and of higher quality coffees being consumed. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Is that a key, do you think, for coffee producing regions to try and focus on increasing local consumption?
Yeah. It seems to be a couple people that I've been talking to recently who are doing some research and work on that very subject.
Yeah.
Are trying to find evidence of coffee producers that are selling within their own country or selling their own coffee or selling their own roasted coffee within their own country. And in fact, I just was talking to someone yesterday about our program and saying, what countries do you see evidence of winning bidders, people that have bidded on a winning COE lot buying within that same country? And we see evidence of it in Peru, Colombia, Brazil, Mexico. And not a lot, but we're seeing a growing amount of roasteries that are buying within the countries where that coffee is actually being grown. So to me, that's indicative of something that hopefully will be a growing trend, because it certainly would make a lot of sense. We think about wine production in Oregon and California, and we have they're exported, but they're certainly consumed within the state and within California. And why not have that as a model? And if that'll help increase consumption and hopefully there create a little bit of financial gain or a new market essentially for those producers, that's pretty great. Costa Rica certainly. I just kind of that's assumed, I guess, but not so much through our program, but just through the fact that there's a lot of tourism there and there's a lot of people that a lot of companies like Brit and other companies that are fairly sizable that are trading into their own country. So, yeah.
I heard a fascinating podcast this week about Costa Rica and bananas. Have you, do you know the story of bananas?
No, I don't. No.
There was this, the son of an American entrepreneur, for the life of me, I can't remember his name, back in the 1800s, 1888. He left America and realized, I'm just not meant to be a cowboy. So I'm going to go and find a venture outside of America, but not too far, and see if I can emulate what we've done here and do it in that country. So he goes to Costa Rica and he decides he's going to build a railway line. He talks to the Costa Rican government. He gets them on board. He raises some venture capital and starts to build this railway. And thousands of people die in the process because they're literally cutting the Amazon down by hand. They get killed by wildlife. They get killed by diseases. They get killed by sickness and all this other kind of stuff in the process. They're not making much headway. He starts going to look for more workers because the Costa Ricans didn't want to do this. They realized that they were all dying in helping him to do this. So, and the reason this was being built was so they could get Costa Rican coffee more easily out of Costa Rica into the US. That was why this railway was going to be built. And so he comes back to the US and he goes to the jails and says, excuse me, anyone who comes and helps me build these railways, if you're still helping me by the end of it, your sentence will be relinquished. Out of 780 prisoners that came to help him, 25 survived.
Oh my God.
25 survived. So he's running out of money, goes to London and borrows £1.5 million and comes back to Costa Rica, and the Costa Rican government is almost completely wiped out with regards to their economic situation. They say to him, we can't afford to give you any more money. And he said, that's fine. I'll pay for the rest of it. But you have to lease me the railway for 99 years. And all my businesses that happen on the railway are going to be tax-free. And I have free reign of the ports as well. And this is all, remember, like, because they want to get coffee out of Costa Rica. There's a problem with coffee production, and he's realizing he's not going to be able to milk the railways for as much money as he wanted. And they were growing bananas as a cheap way to feed the workers. But bananas were not a fruit that you could sell to, civilized society because it was too phallic.
Really?
Yeah. They wouldn't, bananas were not a thing because it was a bit embarrassing to serve them the way that they were, because women would get embarrassed by looking at them, apparently.
That's crazy.
So he was talking to the people who were growing them and found out that it's ridiculously easy to grow bananas, and you only need a couple of trees and then you can turn that into like a nation of banana trees, and it's really cheap. They were in the perfect climate to grow them. So they started growing them and using the railway line. He had to recoup all this money that he had spent. So they start growing bananas. He goes and gets a partner. I believe it was in Boston, and this person was like a genius in marketing. He gets a business partner and they start what is the American Fruit Company. I think that's what it's called. And they figure out how to market bananas to civil society.
Yeah.
And he starts using the railway line that was intended to export coffee to now create this massive banana industry. And they created this industry out of necessity just to recoup the ROI on the train system that they had created. Wow. And made a booming industry all over the world. It was cheap. They figured out a process that they could get it into stores within 7 days from picking, because it only had another 7 days shelf life after that before it went bad.
Right. Yeah.
And the number of people that were dying from banana production was exorbitant, because there was a particular snake that lived amongst the banana plantations that was killing the workers.
Wow.
It's a fascinating story, isn't it?
Yeah, really fascinating. I mean, you hear about the banana republics like in Honduras and, Dole and other companies that, kind of were, large catalysts for that industry. But I didn't know that it kind of had a coffee backstory to it, very interesting. Huh.
It's bizarre how a lot of these things came from entrepreneurial necessity. He needed to recoup the ROI. The coffee wasn't going to be the way to do it. So, let's just see what we can do with bananas.
Crazy.
And I didn't know that people wouldn't eat them because they were phallic.
I've never heard that. It's so silly because
now
bananas
it
are
is,
just
but
so
back
commonplace. Yeah. But it's just that's wild.
There are many porn videos, no doubt, that monopolize.
Oh my God, crazy.
So I want to talk about COE.
Sure.
For anyone who doesn't know what Cup of Excellence is, I think I'm fascinated with Cup of Excellence because of from here to 10 years, what I see happening with the pricing structure and the economics of coffee. I think it's going to play an interesting role of giving us insight into how we can get independence from the C market if that's something that ends up eventuating. So can you explain for people who are listening and don't know a lot about Cup of Excellence, could you tell us the basics of what the program is?
Sure. So we're in our 20th year. We started in 1999, and the program started in Brazil and was funded by the ITC, International Trade Commission, and also funded by a number of other parties to explore a program that really was there were, I think, 5 countries in the original 1997 that were being looked at, and Brazil was one of them. Burundi was another one, and it was basically a way for us. Well, we weren't really an organization at that point. We were just basically Susie Spindler and George Howe were hired as consultants to go to Brazil and figure out a way to see if we could get higher prices for farmers. That was really the underwriting idea. And the ICO was also very involved in the foundation of this gourmet project, was what it was called then. And the idea came from George and Susie to start an auction to look at discovering farmers and their quality through the lens of a competition, and then later an auction. So that's really where we started. And the program is designed to be a national program in the countries where we work. We're currently in 10 countries. I think we might be slated for 11 this year.
12, aren't you? Is Peru still part of it?
Yeah, Peru's just part of it in its 3rd year just now.
So you've got Brazil, El Salvador, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Guatemala, Honduras, Mexico, Rwanda, Burundi, Colombia, Bolivia, and Peru, which aren't a part of that.
Well, this year, coming in 2020, Burundi will not be in the program, which I'm actually probably announcing that for the first time here, because of the upcoming election and security issues that are probably associated with that. Yes, and Rwanda we have not had for the last 2 years, and I'm not sure whether we will or not. We try every year to work with partners the best we can. But we're doing a pilot project in Ecuador, which is a new program.
Oh, wow, that's exciting.
Yep. And then Ethiopia will start here this year for our first year.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah. So that's a project that we've been trying to do for over 12 years, and we finally, a lot of things have changed with ECX, so we're able to actually do the program there for the first time this year. And so there's a lot of movement this year. That's why I was like, I think we're at 11, maybe 12. And last year it was 9. So we Nicaragua, we weren't able also due to security issues. So, but the idea of the program is that farmers are able to enter small samples that are connected to small microlots, and then they enter those coffees into a pre-selection process, and then we train and test a national jury. So we have a number of national cuppers from the countries where we work that are qualified to be on that national jury. Mm-hmm. And then that's the second phase. The third phase is our international juries come in we're a member-based organization where we have members that are primarily importers, roasters around the world. And then we select judges from our membership group and the jury applicants and put together kind of a global international jury. 2 of the national jurists are elected to come on to the international jury, so we always have national representation on the international jury. And then we spend a week going through all the coffees that have qualified, that have passed the 86 and above score with our cupping form, the COE form. And those coffees move along through that whole process through the international phase. And The final cutoff score is actually 87 and above as we get into the last rounds of the COE. And then we take the top 30 coffees. Some countries will have 400 or 500 farmers that enter.
Wow.
The average is really about 250 to 300, but it does change. Certain countries have less representation. And I think last year we had 900 from Brazil and somewhere around 400 to 500 this year with a combined program. We kind of changed the program a little bit with Brazil this year because we usually do a pulp natural and a natural separate competition. Then those coffees that have made it through the 87 and above are then put on an auction platform, like an eBay type auction online, and then sold to the highest bidder. And that usually happens about 4 to 5 weeks after the international phase of the competition. And we usually have anywhere from 70 to 90 bidders that would receive samples if they weren't on the jury, and they can get the samples from the competition and they can cup them in their own labs. We do events all around the world to promote those coffees and get them in people's hands to cup and taste before the auction. And then those coffees are expedited to the winning bidders. And right now we probably have somewhere around 34, 35 different countries that are in our member base, and a lot of interest in the last 5 to 10 years from countries like Korea. Japan historically has been involved quite a long time. Taiwan, of course, and China is an emerging country for us as well. So it's kind of been interesting to see that some of the new interests that are coming out from around the world. And so that's kind of I don't know if I've missed anything on the basic outline, but the idea is that this is a kind of a multiplier program. So a winning farmer is identified. He or she is then connected to a winning bidder. Those bidders maybe come and visit. Maybe they buy additional coffee. Maybe other coffee companies not even associated with our program find out, oh, that was the winner from Guatemala. I would like to buy some of that coffee, and obviously it must be very good because it's been cupped so many times, and I want to find out more about that producer. That's really, when we talk about our impact, it's not the competition, it's not the auction, it's actually everything that happens after that in terms of economic development.
I mean, and it's life-changing for the winners of each of the competitions, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. It's I'm certain there are farmers that have not gotten as much as I would hope that they could have, but there are many producers who've had life-changing stories to tell me, and whole new markets that they had no access to, and that's something we can be very proud of. That we kind of bring everybody together. We talk about us being kind of a bridge, kind of a connective bridge to producers, to roasters, and ultimately consumers. People that can say, "Wow, this is a really amazing cup of coffee, and it's a COE coffee." So, but yeah, the impact is definitely there, and I think right now to date we've raised over $63 million in just auction revenue, and a very large, that's a large percentage of that money, somewhere between 75 and 85%, is going directly back to farmers in their pockets. So this last year we raised, total auction was about $3.1 million. And again, it's only 270,000 pounds of coffee, but it still has that aftershock of having an effect and hopefully creating some identified areas and farmers that maybe weren't identified before or knew that they had that kind of quality. So, yeah.
It's auctions like this that truly are independent of the C market.
Yeah. And the proliferation of auctions in general is that, I mean, we were talking about that, where are we going to be in 10 years? Even just in the last 5 years, the past 5 years, the proliferation of auctions and farmers' actual ownership of their product, being able to manage that product and sell it the way that they want to, and choose the buyers that they want to sell to. And I think of like Rachel and Adam at Geisha Village.
I was going to say Panama's a great example.
Of course,
of all of that.
Yeah, and they have a historical precedent now. Now they're roasting their own coffee and selling it, and that development for the Petersons is. I just thought that was amazing to see that aspect, or that next addition, just like a great vineyard has their own allocation, they have their client list, and they've got that ownership. And so to me, it's exciting to see that. And I see evidence of producers coming to me in other countries saying, I think I'm ready for my own. I want to do my own. And I'm like, that's great. That's what what this whole thing is set up to do, is to inspire you to take more ownership and have more margin and more control of what you're making. So yeah. And I think we'll see more of that. I think you'll see more of that in the next 10 years. I don't know if there'll be any level of cannibalization, but it could happen. But the actors that have to worry about that are people like me and other people, importers, exporters. That may be their burden, but it's a good thing. It means that there's an evolution and a growth to the industry itself. And again, can this be commercialized? Could this be something that would be larger? You see these programs that are coming on with blockchain and trying to actually commercialize larger amounts of coffee through an auction system. I think that there already are some companies that are trying to do that and attempting to do it on a larger scale, besides the micro lot community or the nano lot community. So yeah.
I think it's, for whatever my opinion's worth, I definitely think that it's, once they've figured out how to do it, I think that it's in producers' interest to get onto those kind of programs, because if they can survive from now until it becoming mainstream, I'm not sure that the kinds of producers that are currently feeling the squeeze of what's going on with the C market will be able to survive that long. Only time will tell. And probably a lot of debt is what's going to govern whether they can make it to that time. But from what I'm seeing, and from what I'm sure you're seeing, there's a lot of people that are just saying this isn't worth it. They're either getting out of it altogether and heading in an immigration caravan to another land, or they're cutting down their trees and they're trying to grow something else.
Right.
And this is where I see programs like Cup of Excellence. It's been there for 20 years, but now it's like the proof of concept is there. It's changed enough lives that people are realizing, like, hold on, this is a real viable option. Can we find a way, can we find a way to invest in our product enough so that it becomes a real contender for an 86 scoring coffee?
Yep.
And that's the challenge ahead of them, right?
Yeah. And it's like a value addition. I know in working with other producers in the past, again, as a buyer, that we would encourage diversification of what they were doing. At certain altitudes, you should be maybe looking at certain varieties, or maybe enter some of that coffee from that parcel into COE. We would, as buyers, we encourage them, like, yeah, you should go for it and just see what happens. And that's a good economic model that, not all farmers are blessed with high altitude. So maybe they work with different varieties, or maybe they do have a really diversified parcel and they can do different things with that, instead of just trying to say, let's just get, the prices are good right now, we don't need to worry about it. Let's just grow for volume. Let's grow for, production volume, and maybe not put in certain varieties that don't put out as much volume, but maybe have better cup quality. So, I've always been careful as a buyer to never tell producers what they should do, because they're the farmers and I'm just a taster. I'm just a glorified taster. And it's not, and I've seen, you should put geisha here. That really gets me upset. I really,
these roasters that become agronomists overnight just because they've gotten a plane.
Yeah. Just because you could afford a plane ticket. And, I think it's gotten better. It was pretty bad back in the day. I'd say now some of those recommendations may have been right, but they're just not appropriate. Even if, there are certain things where you're like, well, maybe a raised bed might be better for your drying effect. That's in play. But when it gets into variety and you thinking the climate when you're there for 4 days or 3 days is that stuff that wouldn't have been
white savior complex, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. But it's called out now, and we talk about it now, and I think that's if you're asking for help, that's one thing. If you're there to kind of wave your hand over and say this is going to change everything for you, it's a bad situation. But yeah, I think that there is that ability to work through like you're saying with the COE channel, where you could have certain coffee production that you're doing that would enable you to be exposed to different markets or enter into a program like ours and just see what happens. And I mean, that's the exciting part about what I think we do, for sure. Yeah. So
I'm hearing a lot of producers when I speak to them, and I speak to organizations that are connected into a lot of producers. A lot of them are asking, how do we connect with buyers? And how do we understand how to market our coffee? Is that something that COE is addressing through the program?
Well, we ask for a lot of information from the producers when they enter the lot, and farm information, personal information if they'd like to, all in an effort to put that on our platform, on our website, so that when a buyer buys that coffee, they have a lot of information, not just the variety and the altitude, but how they produce the lot, the fermentation process. Please give us as much information as you can so we can help promote what you're doing, who you are, where you are. So yeah, we take a lot of effort to do that. I think we're trying to improve that so that, if we have a little bit more technology to give information or share it more quickly, and so that and so I hear it on the other side. I hear roasters coming to us saying, "I need more marketing materials to promote this coffee. Can you help me?" So we have it from that side as well, and really, that was the idea, was that, this is something that's a deeper information that you could put into a QR code, or you could put it onto the label or on the website. And I've talked to a couple individuals that are looking at trying to focus on helping farmers to promote themselves, just purely not trying to sell coffee, not trying to buy it, but just trying to give them tools so that they can actually better communicate what's valuable about their coffee and about what they're doing. And that's, I haven't seen it really come out into play. There are, I think, Coffee Unity is this new app that we've been in discussions with their developers in El Salvador, and they're trying to kind of Instagram and Yelp something into one thing.
Okay.
And
there's a lot of apps coming out. I'm hearing about a lot of them, and
they're using our database so that if let's say someone has a cafe in Boston and they have a COE coffee on there, and you're in Boston, and you can go to that app and say, I'm looking for COE coffee. If the cafe will, kind of put up their menu on the site, then it connects to our farmer database. So then if that particular farm, it's a lot of work to get to that point, but I think, we don't even think twice about Yelp and what it's able to do for people. And so I think that's probably the evolution in terms of the innovative part, where that will become far easier in the future to actually identify exactly what's in your cup and be able to see information about that farmer and the farm and the lot. So yeah, it's pretty.
Have you heard about what Yelp's done? They are evil as shit. Oh my God, there's a documentary about how their salespeople were incentivized to sell advertising on Yelp. And what they would do is they would mess with the rankings so that if you would buy advertising, your favorable rankings would show. And if you turned them down, they only showed your 1-star ratings. Everything else was hidden. No matter how many 4 or 5-star ratings you had, anytime someone searched for your business, you would only get shown... They would only get shown the 1-star ratings.
That's a class action lawsuit waiting to happen.
I wish I could remember what the name of the documentary is. But I did a Daily Coffee Pro episode on it. It is scary as shit.
Yeah.
How much control they have over. They sent a number of businesses bust because of it. And once you buy their advertising, if you try and get out of it, they bury everything that you did. You'll never get, if someone does a search on you in Yelp, you'll never come up.
Wow. Yeah. That is so overreaching. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, but they have a monopoly, right?
Yeah. Wild.
I know, it's scary. With regards to this app, the one question I have with that is something that I think that is a real problem in our, for the whole value chain, I think, and I'd love to hear what you think about this. I think coffee is in a branding crisis.
Mm-hmm.
I think that where the evolution of coffee has gotten to, the fact that we call a cup of Nescafe coffee and $100 cup of, the Elita Estate winning cup at auction for Best of Panama, a cup of coffee is a real problem that we're being faced with.
Mm-hmm.
And so in our industry, Cup of Excellence is a brand. Cup of Excellence means something. To the general public, this app that you're talking about, if they get told this is a Cup of Excellence winner, I'm not sure that the general public understand what that means. Certainly the drinker of a cup of Nescafe coffee won't know what that means. Where do you think this is all going to sit in the grand scheme of figuring out how the general public become aware to the problems that our industry is facing at the producer's end?
Yeah, it seems like there's a couple questions in there. One is, is that the disparity in the Nescafe to the $100 cup? Are we losing our audience, right? The consumer? Are they? And in the meantime, the producers are kind of trying to figure out what are we supposed to do?
Right.
Are we supposed to grow?
Should we aim for 99 or should we aim for 70?
Yeah, and if so, how do we do that?
Yeah.
And is that really what? Are there going to be 100 people lined up to drink that $100 cup of coffee, or 100 people lined up to drink the Nescafe cup of coffee? More likely the latter. And because it's just economics. It's really basic.
Right.
And everyone has the right to populate whatever segment that they think that they can work in. The roaster, the producer. But is there any not organization, but is there any movement to really put out really sound information so that producers their heads aren't spinning?
Yeah.
Because one day they're supposed to do this, the next day they're supposed to do that. Just the empowerment part, I think. The thing that I see when I see the media talk about the $100 cup of coffee is that's crazy, right? Why are they doing that? Who's doing that? And it's usually panned, and it's frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
But that's especially like local news when they'll run a story of this crazy expensive cup of coffee. It's just to kind of it's to basically shock.
It's sensationalization.
Yeah, and there have been some recent things that have been done that were a little bit more comprehensive, especially around the Elita coffee. That I think CNN did something like CNN International or something like that, did a little story, and they actually spent some time with the Lamastus family and talked about, well, why is this so much better? And then they had the reporter cup.
Context? Shock horror.
Yeah, I know. And I think that's what we're hungry for, is context within all of these categories that we seem to be putting out there into the world for consumers to decide.
Right.
And so, maybe just more of all of this will start to kind of resonate where it needs to resonate, and what doesn't make sense will just, won't be able to evolve. So will there be the end of Nescafe and a free cup of coffee or a 99-cent cup of coffee? And this is something that has been debated. I know in my former job there was an idea, let's just give away coffee for free for our customers that come in the store to shop for other products. And it sounded great because we know that's a good cup of coffee and that's great. But then the conversation became, we're undervaluing this. Yeah. And actually the program did go forward. And actually I think we were, I don't know, one of the coffee media people came up and had written a story about how we've kind of thrown farmers under the bus for doing this. And I had to kind of, as a buyer for a company, say, well, we're trying to get more coffee into people's hands so they see quality and then they want to buy that coffee. So it's an incentivizer. But I had to say, I personally, not representing that company, but personally felt like you're right. The reporter was right. And that if we're doing that, we're giving really a mixed message, because it has no value. right? It's just something we think just it's worth giving away. So you could kind of play
just a cup of coffee.
just a cup of coffee. Yeah, it's nothing special, and it's a way to get you in the store to buy other
Right.
products. And I mean, that's been done, that's what Lost Leader, I think, was something in the article title. But that brings up a lot of really interesting questions about how we position ourselves within the industry, and what information is most important to convey to consumers. Because that was the thing. We had 10 seconds really to kind of have a moment with an interested consumer that wanted to find out, well, why is the Guatemala priced differently than the Costa Rica?
Right. Whereas if you had handed someone a cup of coffee and said, here, have a free cup of $100 coffee.
Right.
You know
right.
what I mean? Like that's an impact statement right there. Here, have a free cup of $100 coffee. And they're like, what do you mean? Then they want to have a conversation.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that's a great way of stating it for sure. Yeah.
But it's the problem that cafes are facing for the last number of decades with regards to specialty coffee, right? How do I teach my baristas to have a quick conversation with customers that helps them understand that we spend good money on quality coffee so that we can support the supply chain?
Yeah.
Customers don't give any fucks when they haven't had their coffee and they're trying to figure out how to get to work as quickly as possible. And by the way, is it going to take more than 3 minutes for me to get my coffee? I understand that there's 40 people waiting, but I really need my cappuccino with 2 sugars right now.
Yeah. And this is maybe a caffeine problem and not a beverage problem.
Right. So we're calling caffeine coffee. That's an added part of it. Yeah.
And that's, the idea that, this weekend I went to a wine bar and sat down, and they specialize in orange wines, and had a nice glass of wine from Slovenia, and immediately asked for the bottle. I want to look in and read it. And I started talking to the bartender about it and got information, but I was ready for that moment. I wanted to be engaged and I wanted to learn. And that's the difference between, and now I'm not saying that caffeine is a barrier to that, but for the morning masses where the largest percentage of coffee is consumed, a vast majority of those people are not interested in finding out exactly what kind of variety it was. But that's changing too. The whole idea, it's changing. I don't know if it's changing fast enough.
Yeah, right.
That's the problem. It's a slow
change
moving.
And then there's change.
Yeah, this is kind of like a little bit of glimmer of hope that there's a different level of engagement with coffee, and it's just where's the right theater for that to occur, and it's not in line with your to-go cup, waiting patiently to catch your bus, and you're not going to have that moment. You might drink it and think, God, I really want to find out more about that coffee. Now, maybe that's where, that there's something that, goes along with that cup of coffee. I know the last couple coffee service that I had here in Portland, there was like what we called at Stumptown a bag card, but basically there was a bunch of information that I could find out more, and a QR code, and I could scan it. And I was having lunch somewhere in Portland, and I got that service and scanned that information, and was like, that's awesome, that's great. So I was ready for that moment. Now, I'm obviously a geek, but there were 50 other people in that cafe that were getting served the same, whatever coffee they were ordering. They were getting that same, card and information for them to go deeper if they wanted to. And maybe not there in that moment, but maybe they take the picture and look at it later. That wasn't happening 5-10 years ago to the level that it's happening now internationally. I was in Amsterdam about a month ago, had the same exact type of service presented to me with a bag card or card information. In Seoul, not just a year ago. I'm obviously identifying places where I want to go, but I don't know that that's going to happen when I get in there. So that's becoming more commonplace within the higher tiered, cafes around the world. So, yeah.
Do you have any interest in like intergenerational buying habits? Is that something that you ever get fascinated by?
Oh yeah. I am, because now I'm pretty old, so most of my staff is quite a bit younger than me, and And I've asked them,
You're pretty old.
Oh,
I,
well, what
have you looked in the mirror? Dude, I'm pretty
well,
old. You're
I
really
mean,
not.
well, we have a good group of millennial aged folks, right? Which and the comments I got was like, so when you started to work for us, what did you think of COE? And one of my employees, she said, well, I just knew it existed. It was just there. I don't know. I didn't really know how it got there. It was already just kind of built into the coffee equation, and I just found that really interesting. So when I've dug in deeper with other people that are maybe in that millennial set, I'm curious what their interests are and how they relate to who we are and what we do. And I feel like we have to kind of reposition ourselves and kind of pretend like we just started. That, like, it's not good to assume, oh, we've been here forever, everyone knows who we are. No, they don't. They actually don't. The younger generation of coffee consumers don't really know who we are. Maybe a few countries where we have, really have a tradition of consumer connectivity, Japan being the number one. We're an active brand there. And
Really?
Yeah, very much. Yeah. It's, and that is like the largest impact that I've seen, and definitely going to areas or going to cafes in Tokyo and seeing people coming in and asking for it, different age groups, and just kind of hanging out for an afternoon in this one place where there was quite a few COEs on the menu, and just seeing who was ordering that, what were they looking for. So yeah, I'm very fascinated with that.
And they ask for the brand. They ask by brand, Cup of Excellence.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
But this is a company that has worked tirelessly to make that happen. Yeah. And they've spent the better part of 20 years with us making that happen. So they've got a commitment. So I think as they see younger coffee lovers coming in, then they're I'm curious what if it's a specific country, which it seems to be country driven, and that seems to be the big thing, and then maybe process. And then maybe variety. Those three are all kind of in play. And I feel like maybe the younger generation might be asking more questions than maybe my generation, as a Gen Xer. So
I'm a Gen Xer too, so that's why I wanted to make sure that you were very chill on the whole very old thing.
I'm just
No, I know you're messing around. But the reason I wanted to dive into that subject is I've been doing some research on Gen Z. Or Gen Z, as your country people, my current country people are saying. They're a fascinating bunch, and I think that they are going to be a wonderful target marker for Cup of Excellence. And the reason I say that is because our generation raised Gen Z, and Gen Z are demanding so much of the backstory behind a product before they get behind it, because they want to know that this world is going to continue to exist for long enough that they're going to be able to have children and grandchildren in it. And so social impact, socioeconomic impact, all of that is going to be really important. Climate impact, all of that is important behind a brand for Gen Z. That's where I think like an organization like Cup of Excellence speaks so directly to the Gen Z coffee consumer.
Yeah, that's really interesting. My oldest son is 21, coming up here soon, and those exactly. Yeah, he's kind of. I think he represents that generation of the kind of a mission-driven generation, and that fits right into what we're doing and what a lot of other organizations that are doing great work out there are doing too. So maybe we were. Not we as in COE, but our generation, we were just maybe setting out the landscape to be populated by that Generation Z or Z to then take the mission forward, hopefully. I also think, I've had conversations with my son about like, what did you guys do? Look what you've done.
Did they really say
we have to clean up this mess? And I find that interesting that
we'll blame it on the boomers.
What's that?
Let's blame it on the baby boomers.
I was going to say, let's blame the next generation. But I didn't grow up having that sense of blaming my parents for the world's problems. I mean, like directly, like, where were you guys? I mean, maybe when it comes to war and other things that were really blatant, but not asking the questions that I think this generation is, which I think
They're
is
so
refreshing
smart,
as
aren't
hell.
they?
Yeah. It's great. It's about time. Yeah. So
I think that's a really interesting thing that you just said there. We didn't grow up blaming our parents or asking the same kinds of questions. Why do you think that is?
I think I was so disinterested in my parents' generation because I was so busy trying to create my own identity that I was just like, whatever, I'm just gonna go out and just carve out my part of the world and do it on my terms. And
Right.
so maybe it was just kind of a complete, almost like alienation of that generation of like, whatever you guys are up to, I don't really care because I'm here right now.
And we didn't have the threat of, is the planet going to eliminate humans?
Yeah. I mean, we certainly had a Cold War that looked pretty bad and a potential for something to turn bad. And that was kind of scary if you think about, what was going on with the Reagan era during that time. And but not to the level now. I mean, it's so much more palpable now as to what's really happening. There's no.
Oh, look at what's going on in Australia as we speak.
I know. It's just a tragedy. I can't even fathom just the landmass that I've been hearing that we're talking about. If it was being compared to two Maines or something like that in the size and the scope, and just devastating. Yeah.
When we've been reaching out, I've been speaking to owners of big coffee roasters in Australia and just saying to them, listen, I have an army of people that are ready to help. We just need to know, we need to know what people need. Do they need support? Do we need to help them get access to architects to help them redesign their cafes? Do they need to borrow machinery and equipment and all of that kind of stuff? Just let me know and I will make the phone calls and hook them up with the people that can help them. And we can, put the call out there through the podcast. There's 12,000 people a month that listen to this podcast. Surely we'll be able to access the right kind of people through this. A lot of what I'm hearing back is people are just in shock. People are still in shock, and it's going to be months, even years, before people are going to be able to get their head around exactly what's happened. Some of the businesses that have burnt down have no insurance. Some of them have insurance for their business, but not for their house.
Yeah.
The generosity, and this is a real tribute to the Aussie spirit. This is the first time in 4 years since moving to the US I've been homesick, because the Aussie spirit is such an incredible thing. And when this kind of disaster happens, we really come together. And what Gina DeBritta, shout out to Gina she's the owner of Numero Uno, and she's been going and visiting and calling all of her wholesale customers to check on them. And she's got a lot of them in bushfire affected areas. And she's saying what's happening is so many people are donating goods and food and, furniture and things to fire affected regions. But the houses are burnt down, so they've got nowhere to put any of the stuff.
Yeah, right. I didn't even think about the fact that even trying to bring in aid. This was the same problem in Haiti during the earthquake. It was just piling up in Port-au-Prince, and they couldn't. It was a big distribution issue, infrastructure, roads, all of it. But this is probably in play as well with Australia, and I think I had read something this morning where this will take years to really get back to normal.
Oh, decades.
Decades.
Yeah. Whole towns have been wiped out. We've lost 500 million wildlife.
Yeah.
Ecosystems have been wiped out.
Yeah.
And you put it in context and people are like, is the bush going to survive? But the Australian wildlife, the bush, the trees that we have there, it requires fire to regenerate. That's how our trees survive. They've arrested 188 people for arson so far.
Yeah,
Fuck?
I couldn't understand the level of how many arsonists were involved, and I just don't even really understand why that would be happening. I know in Brazil, this was a big problem. Whether the government was just the government was just letting it happen because they're
agriculture.
used. Yeah, exactly. It's just part of this is what we do every year, but not knowing that this massive fire was connecting to other fires. But were there over 300 fires still, from what I understand?
Oh, they're merging into mega fires now.
Yeah.
So what's happening right now is that the fire that was coming south from New South Wales and the fire heading north from Victoria, they're the two different states that neighbour each other, for anyone that doesn't know. They're now merging and they're creating a mega fire. And so once that mega fire takes hold, and it is, we've never seen anything like it in Australia.
There's no way to even know how do you plan to stop it, or mitigate it in any way. So
we don't have the resources. There's 22 million people in Australia.
Wow.
The land mass is 3/4 the size of North America.
Right.
It's terrifying because we're still at the beginning of the bushfire season. There's still 4 or 5 months to go.
Well, are you planning to go back? Is there a hope to go back soon? Or I know. MICE is coming up. I know that might be a timeline, but
no, I've decided to stay put in the US this year, and what I've decided, and what I've been speaking to a lot of these owners about, is that we need to wait for the shock to wear off and be ready to kick into action then. So once the devastation has hit and they know the full impact, we just need to be ready and waiting with contacts and like we said, have architects ready and have designers ready and ways that we can start helping with support and connect them to the right counselling agencies and things like that. So I'm building up a database of that kind of thing, and just be ready for when they're ready. Yeah. Because we've never seen anything like this. And yes, the American spirit, the Australian spirit is incredible. But the adrenaline of that is going to wear off, and that's going to turn into anger and, following the usual stages of grief. And we've just got to be ready as an international coffee community to say, hey, listen, we're here. How can we help?
Yeah. Well, that's good. I'm glad you're championing, a level of assistance. And I see more coffee companies in the U.S. saying, we're putting together a fund. Please, so that's all starting to kind of happen, and I'm sure it's happening globally. Totally necessary. So, yeah.
For all of this year, what we're saying with regards to ad sponsorship for the podcast, if you want to sponsor the podcast, what we're offering is that anyone who's like on the fence about whether they want to sponsor with advertising, if you can show us a receipt for the amount of the ad sponsorship, we're happy for you to donate that money to either Wires or any of the rural fire services in Australia. Show us that receipt, and that's enough payment for us for the advertising. So you can donate to them and have the ad sponsorship position here. So that's a way for us.
Great.
We don't want to be a middleman for cash. That's not something that we want to do. But we do want to incentivize people to give to these relief efforts, because Australia is lacking in leadership right now with regards to the really top governmental levels. The fucking Prime Minister goes off. I'm sorry. I'm just really angry about that. He picked up and went on vacation in the middle of it. He went to Hawaii for 4 days with his family.
My gosh. Yeah,
it's not just lack of leadership. It's un-Australian to do that. People were dying, Like the animals are being wiped out. Businesses are being crushed. The economic impact, the sheer shock of no longer having an income for these people.
Yeah. That just is the wrong message to send. And when you need to be in there, and I don't know what kind of national relief programs are being put in place, but it seems like the response has been like,
minimal.
We'll figure it out later. Maybe that's the shock, that it's such a big shock that it's paralyzing even the government that's their job. What they're there to do.
It's his job. He went off to Hawaii to set up a church. That's why he went to Hawaii, to help set up a church, because he's like some sort of fundamentalist Christian. And, Australia is one of those countries where religion is not something that comes into the equation.
Right.
And so for him to do that while the rest of the country was burning down was just seen as an utter lack of leadership. Because the people don't know what to do. We've never faced anything like this before.
Yeah.
He's cut funding. He's not going to pay the volunteers. He's now decided that he will. But he said at the time, no, we're not going to pay the volunteer firefighters.
Wow. That's, yeah.
When you look at things like this, these kind of climate situations, I think it's a real insight into the future of our industry. I know that seems like a stretch to get from one of those things to the other, but just on the front end of the value chain, in Australia, cafes are a big, big deal. They're a part of our culture. You've been there, you've seen it, you see how important they are in the day-to-day life of Australians. We teach our kids how to order baby chinos from the time they're 1 year old. Like, we don't have Wi-Fi in cafes in Australia. They are a place of community. And in our industry, and I think this is going to happen more and more, what's going to happen across the world is these climate disasters are going to, in different parts of our value chain, have a real dynamic impact on creating gaps and holes in where that happens. And it scares the shit out of me, quite frankly. We get at the beginning of a decade and we've just seen this happen. We're not going to understand what it means for coffee supply into Australia.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, right now there's pretty severe fire. Well, it's not in the coffee region, but it's in the southeast corner of Nicaragua. And because of the political situation there, Costa Rica has been saying, we'll send help. You don't have the infrastructure to put this fire out, and it's bordering our country, and the government said no, we don't want your help. So that's a gap. That's a gap. It's like, this is a time to put politics aside and basically try to save a bigger issue, a bigger problem. And I know the U.S., even though there is some embargo issues going on right now, there is U.S. aid going down to Nicaragua to help fight this fire, but they refused their neighbor. So, this is causing political strife, international political strife. These are the things you're talking about, where it will have an impact on industries related to where these countries are, involved in production or consumption. And so it should bring people together, crisis, right? That's the whole idea, is to solve problems together collectively. But
especially in crisis. We have this saying in Arabic, in times of great happiness and great sadness, everything that came before that moment is irrelevant.
Well, that's beautiful. Yeah.
It seems to not be translating. Like, I feel like that translates in cultures, no matter whether you have a deep, deep culture or cultural heritage or not. Everybody understands that sentiment, except when it comes to politics. Yeah. Especially this current climate, political climate. It's been the most polarizing in my life that I've seen, other than and I wasn't really around during Vietnam, but certainly U.S. That was a very polarizing time, and it went on for a long period of time, other than the Civil War. But yeah, we're definitely in that kind of situation. So yeah. When people say to me, like, what's it like living in the US? I've found it incredibly difficult to adapt to US culture, if I'm honest. I found it difficult to adapt to Australian culture, like a white Australian culture, because I was raised Arab, but this has been even more difficult than that. And I'm always looking for, like, well, what's the great thing to come out of this? I got a front row seat to this shit show, to quote the great George Carlin.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because I have friends that have kind of shut down their news cycle because they're just like, I can't deal with it anymore. and I'm like, I'm on the other side
That
where
doesn't help though, does it?
I understand it's maybe somewhat of a healing process for some people. It just can't. That's what they need to do to keep themselves healthy, right?
Self-preservation.
Yeah, and that's fine. I unfortunately can't do that. I really, I'm a student of history and someone that loves current affairs, and I work in the industry that I work in, or not industry, but within this organization, I'm working with a lot of government
Yep.
organizations. I need to know what's going on politically, socially. So it would be, yeah, it would be very ignorant of me to just say I can't deal with it, because I have to deal with it. And as I've done that, and I'm working globally with this organization, it's just, there's constantly something going on in the world, whether it's something's going on in Congo or Burundi, or issues going on in South America, and does that impact what we're doing in Colombia? Does that, so I'm constantly tied into it, and I think it makes you stronger. I think taking that stuff on does make you stronger, but you do have your times when you're just, your hands are up in the air and you're like, there's just no solution. There isn't. You just have to write it out, or you have to know how to react to it appropriately, so that you don't tune out. And that it's something that before you know it, you're gone. So you have to embrace every minute that you're around, and that's just been my approach, I guess, to what I'm doing with our work and just life outlook too, I guess too. So yeah.
I was saying to a friend the other day, America has forced me to get smarter. And it's not America per se, but I don't have the luxury of the ignorance that I used to be afforded now, because of the situation that our world finds itself in. We have a situation in the coffee industry that is, I don't want to say untenable, but it's definitely alarming on many, many levels across the value chain. And we live in a world that is shifting so quickly that you don't get a chance to catch your breath before the next crisis happens. And I'm not a fan of outrage culture. I try very hard to stay as level-headed as possible. I mean, I don't know how you live in Oregon and in Portland particularly and deal with it. It seems like such a polarizing kind of situation right now with what's going on with a lot of the protests and things like that are happening. But it's one of those situations where I think in the world right now, you either have to be super ignorant as a survival mechanism, or you've got to be super informed as a survival mechanism. And I think our industry is a great example of how that's going to play out.
Yeah, I mean, I like to think that our industry is fairly progressive and solution-based in regards to lots of issues and kind of policies and things like that, and why, questioning things. I think I'd like to think that we're more responsive to that. Now maybe not in solving the actual coffee crisis that we have, but in looking, trying. I can't say that it's a repressive. That generally it's a repressive type of industry, or people that are part of it. It's a very I think it represents a pretty broad spectrum of attitudes and positions. And so it's always a healthy conversation when I'm talking to people that are in the industry about what they think about an issue, or, like you mentioned, Portland. Like, to me, the biggest problem that we're facing as a city is the homeless issue. Right. And it's so bad in the whole West Coast, the whole country.
God.
The whole
San
country
Diego's the same. Yeah. LA's worse. I can't go to LA anymore.
Yeah. It's, and in my daily, kind of commute, I take the bus to work, and it's at a point where, you might give out a little bit of money or maybe some food, but then you realize there's just 30 more people on the next corner. And there's that point of like, I can't do enough. And even as a city, the response has been really, I think, as a city planning, city government thing, has been horrible and very poor. And because you see all of these apartments being built, and there's so much growth going on in Portland, a lot of population growth, and there's just there's buildings going up everywhere, and I'm like, that's somewhat odd. There's buildings that have been condemned and shut down because they're probably getting ready to develop it.
Yeah.
So why can't we have some interim quick shelter, pop-up shelters? I mean, God, please do something, and it's just not happening. It's not happening. You see private companies doing things, or at least maybe saying they're doing some things to alleviate it. I know there's been some pretty large financial commitments from Amazon to try to help the issue nationally, but it's just a really, that's maybe part of the American culture, that there's a certain level of coldness about the fact that, like, well, what are you going to do? They're homeless.
Exactly.
I mean, that's pretty much the attitude. It's like, well, it's probably your fault that you're homeless, that's unfortunately part of the culture.
That's the part of American culture that I found completely impossible to integrate into.
Yeah.
It's a very individualistic culture, community, unless people are in your either religious group or, well, mostly your religious group. Mm-hmm. Unless you're a part of my group, I have no reason to want to help you. And I'll only help you in my group to a point where you're not doing better than I am. Yeah.
And there is a little bit of apathy built into that makes it, that kind of drives it as well.
Yeah.
So,
and it hides behind the guise of we're all going for the American dream. And I've literally seen people step over homeless people here in San Diego.
Yeah,
I was riding the bus in LA purely because I've decided and made a commitment to improve my carbon footprint. I don't own a car, so I get around on public transport everywhere. And this woman said to me, "Why are you on the bus?" And I said, "I'm going downtown." And she said to me, "But you're not poor?" I'm like, wow, if that's the mindset of the reason behind why people are using public transport, we've got bigger problems.
Yeah, that's that privileged. If you're doing well enough, why would you ever set foot on a train or a bus? That's
just not how the world sees public transport.
No, and it's funny because I don't have a car here in Portland, just bike to work and bus or train or whatever, and we have a very great system here, so I love it because I get work done. I can read. I don't have to
audiobooks, all of it.
Yeah, and it I would say the use here in Portland is pretty high use. Like, really, there's a lot of people committed to public transportation, but there definitely is that underlying thing too. Like you're saying, and in other cities, it's probably, LA I would think is one that's not. It's such a car city, many other cities that are like it too. This is the way that they're developed. And Denver, used to live in Colorado too, so completely different use. Like, the buses are empty. Like in Boulder, there's very, very little use, and it's good. It's a good system. But internationally, after traveling so much, I just think, well, that's what. Yeah, you just, that's what you do. It's so much easier. Why would if you're in a city like Seoul, it's incredible transit system, and it's great. So hopefully that will change. I think people will realize maybe through time that they may not have a choice. They may have to take public transportation because there may not be other. Gas could be unaffordable.
It's already almost unaffordable, isn't it?
Yeah.
I don't know how people do it. These people who commute, who drive for an hour each way every day, they must be spending exorbitant amounts on. Gas here in California at the moment is really so expensive. Fucking crazy.
Yeah. Probably the highest in the country. Yeah.
I look at it and I'm like, I am happy to take the bus. Thank you very much. Even in a city like San Diego that doesn't have like a fabulous bus system, it's still better than a lot of the other alternatives. I have a question for you about something on your website that I didn't understand.
Oh, sure. Yep.
Talk to me about National Winner.
Oh yeah, good question. About 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago, farmers had been asking, could we have, we didn't qualify for COE because our coffee score didn't reach 86, but we had an 85 or we had an 84. Is there any way to create a second auction structure for those, what we now call national winners? So that was a way for us to take on more farmers, to expand the program, so that those producers that made it all the way to the international phase, but during that week they didn't qualify with an 86 or higher score, that we would then put together a 5-day auction for those coffees that are certainly fine coffees and have been identified. And so, and this is an option. The farmer can opt in. The country can opt in. If they don't want to run that program, they don't have to, but almost all of the countries want to run the National Winners Program. And so our normal COE auction is just one day. It can last for 3 to 4 hours on average, but the National Winners Auction runs Monday through Friday of the week that we do the COE week. And the price points are starting at $3.50 and then $4 for the higher tier. So basically an 85 to 86 is a 350 floor for the auction, and then an 86 to 86.99 is a $4 floor for the auction price. So it's just a way to try to get more coffee out there, and it's been confusing to people. People are so used to the COE auction, they're like, we don't really know what this is, and so we've been just trying to repeat, so that that people know. In some countries, Guatemala has done very well with that. They've sold, I think this past year they had something like maybe 12 lots that sold through the National Winners auction, and the prices were well above the floor price. They went up $4 or $5, that kind of thing. So that's the idea, is to try to actually get more of the certainly good coffees that just didn't make the cut.
And so these coffees that are selling at National Winner and at COE, tell me so you're saying 75% average goes directly to the producer?
It really ranges on anywhere between 75 and 83%. And the reason why is some countries have more natural coffees, and when we do the tolls, there's a higher shrink loss.
Okay.
Because of it may be up to 30 to 40% of the weight is in the processing is lost, so that they get less money back. But it averages about 75 to 83%. So of that's actually dollars in hand to the producers. So of the auction price.
Okay.
So yeah.
Help me understand that a little bit further. So the shrinkage from the coffee.
Yeah, if you let's say you put in a 12-bag lot in parchment, and then when you did the final milling,
oh, okay, it's going in
honey,
parchment. Okay,
yeah.
Sorry,
yeah.
I thought it was going in ready to go.
Some countries do, some don't. They'll actually present, like Costa Rica. There's so many micro mills. Farmers elect to send in the green coffee in Grain Pro and have it ready for shipment. Others deliver it in parchment, and then we have to do the milling. And
wow,
so
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So, and then, the countries that we work in, they do have a commission that, like on a cafe or e-cafe, the associations that we work with, they get a commission for running the program. So the better the auction does, they get a little bigger slice of the pie. We take 1.5% commission, which basically pays for our auction platform.
Which is fair. Like, come on,
yeah,
it's only 1%.
1.5%. I mean, I would like to get to a point where we would just move the commission away. And if we're going through a lot of big structural change within the organization, because we're going to split of the ACE and COE will become two different nonprofits, and Cup of Excellence will become a C3, and ACE will remain a C6. And then I would be available.
What's the difference between the two? Sorry for interrupting you there.
Oh, no problem. Well, a C6 is similar to what CQI, Coffee Quality Institute, SCA is, because we have an auction platform, so we're in the market.
Yep.
So when the IRS looked at us and said, well, you do have a financial component to your organization, so we're not going to give you C3.
Okay.
So now that we can have ACE just be the auction, the arbiter of the auction, and COE is a pure C3 program that could seek funding from, U.S. companies that want to help fund us. So my goal is to try to expand as we go into the C3 to expand our foundation support so that we could basically offset any of that and ideally even offset the fees the countries have to pay us to bring a head judge, bring a jury. So they have to pay it like a licensing fee. What I would like to do is eliminate that through foundation support. So the countries don't have to pay anything. The farmers don't have to pay anything except the loss of samples that we send out. They
Right.
those samples are pounds of coffee that would be dollars in their pocket, but it's just the cost of doing business for any farmer. They know they have to sample out some of their product. But if we could offset all of that, it would be a more robust program. We would have more farmers that want to enter because some farmers are skeptical. They're like, well, I've heard it's really good, but then I heard that they didn't get the price that was on the auction
Really?
website. And I'm like, well, yes, but there's a reason why. And then we have to, kind of explain it. If those costs were gone and they're getting 90% or 95% of the auction price, that's a better goal for us. That's sustainability for us, is if we can get it into a zero-sum game for the people that want to be a part of it. And so, that's kind of my future goals here, is to try to mobilize that program so we have more, that farmers know that they don't have to figure out why is there such a difference between the auction price and what I got. And we have all of the outturns of the milling. We share all that information with producers. We had a producer one year in Mexico that identified this can't be right. There's something wrong. And it turns out the formula was wrong and he did not get the funds that he was supposed to get.
Wow.
He actually called me. We talked about it. We got back in touch with the Ama Cafe, the organization. They were like, oh my gosh, it was literally a formula issue in the cell. We went back. He got the rest of the money that he was supposed to get back. So, that kind of back and forth is really encouraged. We want producers to feel like they can reach out directly to us or the association they're working with. If they think that something's not right. We all make mistakes, and that was one that was, not a giant mistake, but enough for him to recognize, like, this, I could have sold this in the market and gotten a little bit of a better price. So can we revisit that? And we were able to fix it. So, but yeah.
Something that fascinates me with that kind of thing is the difference in cultures, and you have to manage, I think we decided it was 11 or 12 different cultures. In my conversations with people on this podcast, something that keeps coming up is that people on this end of the supply chain tend to have I don't know what the most politically correct way to put this is, but let's just say a lack of empathy for the relationship that different cultures have with talking about money. Do you notice that difference in culture and the way that different cultures talk about money through Cup of Excellence?
Well, I think that that there's definitely kind of almost like a comparative conversation that goes on. So I'll have partnerships in Burundi where they're like, why didn't we get $300 a pound? Because that's what Costa Rica got.
Right.
And your program, we have good coffee. We have great coffee. Right. So it should be valued at the same. And so we have to have a conversation about the fact that, Costa Rica has a very robust promotional program to support, Cafe de Costa Rica and other organizations that, have large budgets associated with promoting, executing, and, putting Costa Rica on the map as coffee quality. Burundi has a program. They have a promotional wing. It's not as funded as maybe other countries like Brazil. And so when I explained to them, we do all we can to promote, but we're only mobilized to do so much. And so your country is faced with the fact of trying to promote what its great coffee next to its neighbor Rwanda, who maybe has a different program for promotion and execution. So when we talk about that, it's totally understood. I mean, the organizers that I've worked in Burundi, they're like, yeah, we get it. We know that we actually couldn't go to the following trade shows this year. Our budget was changed, but we still don't understand why we don't have the $300 a pound.
Right.
And so
Do you find like the assertiveness around talking about money? Like I know in a lot of Asian cultures, it's you don't directly, same with the Arab cultures, you don't directly speak about, why didn't you pay me this much? Or this is the price that you said you would pay me and you didn't pay me that. Do you find those kinds of things happen interculture?
Yeah. Flipping it from the producer side to the roaster side,
Yeah.
I have had conversations where, let's say, and it seems to kind of focus around geisha. If it's a geisha, it's got to be worth X amount.
Right.
And so therefore there's just an immediate idea that it has to be this price and this is what people will pay for it. I'm like, yeah, but have you tasted it? I mean, is it a good coffee? And so the idea of quality to, what's kind of trending seems to be an issue, especially in China. I see that that there's just an expectation no matter what that, these are going to get high prices. And I'm like, you have to look at the merit of what you're actually buying. Not the trappings of what it is, but the actual content of what you're buying, and that seems to be very different. And I don't know why. I know why geisha is such a strong proposition in terms of financial reward for producers, because it has been a game changer in terms of quality, and it's just so unique. And but there's so much money around that I think sometimes
talk about a brand.
Yeah, and it's something that I continue. Well, I look at value when I see a coffee that's a beautiful Bourbon or Caturra that's second place to the geisha that won. And it troubles me to be, this coffee seems to be worth more in its actual quality.
Yeah.
But yet it didn't get the price. So that conversation's constantly going on. It plays out in every auction. You can go and look at the results and just see it. And I have my personal views about what I like in coffee. We all do. As a program, I want to see all boats rise, and but the reality is that there's certain concentrations that are backed by financial kind of trend, brand, and they're always going to play out, whether it's anaerobic or whatever the next frontier is around that. Yeah, and so therefore that's got to be worth more because it's anaerobic. Those kinds of conversations.
Yeah, right.
So I find it fascinating.
Merlin Preza, and I talk about her a lot on this podcast because she was so. When she came on this podcast, she gave us real insight into a lot of the very difficult things they're experiencing across Latin America with smallholder producers of commercial grade coffee. And one thing she said was, we don't understand, Lee, and my producers keep saying to me, I have to pick a coffee cherry the same way someone who's growing geisha has to pick a coffee cherry. Mm-hmm. So why is the coffee that's picked because it's a geisha, why do they deserve more money than the coffee that's picked for commercial? Mm. She's having a completely different conversation and perspective, but that doesn't make it any less valid. Like, her perspective is, we have to feed these families. Mm-hmm. We have to pay for this coffee. And I'm in a lot of different minds because I understand the economic situation from this perspective. The geisha is more highly sought after. There's a lot more, demand for it and branding behind it. And the things that are selling that coffee have nothing to do with, the person that picked it. Mm-hmm. Except for they may be more selective of the cherries that they're picking.
Right.
With regards to the qualities. But these are serious concerns that are facing commercial producers versus the kinds of coffees that are being submitted for COE. Mm-hmm. And when she says to me, we've gone well beyond the point of trying to get prices that will help us elevate our coffees to be able to compete for those kinds of competitions and for those kinds of prices. We're now at the point where we're just trying to make enough money for our families to survive.
Right.
You look at that and you think, I don't know how to help in this situation. I don't even know what would be a solution.
Yeah, I think there's been so many discussions around, at what point in the industry do we jump in collectively? It's an undervalued product, even on the lower quality scale. It's severely undervalued product. So if the problem is the competitive nature of everybody you're competing against is also going at a price point, so that creates the margin. And if somebody decided I'm going to pay $3 more to my producer, or $1.50 more to my producer, because I believe that they need this to survive, but I'm $7 higher than all of my competitors.
You're pricing yourself out of a market then.
Yeah, that's the biggest pinch that I think. Now, if you could differentiate what you're doing, what specialty evolved out was differentiation of what makes it different. So therefore, it should be more valuable. How do you do that in a commercial? How do you do that in a commercial environment where you can't hang your hat on that and say, oh well, we have a better 80 than the next person's 80. So then it's loyal. If there's loyalty to a brand, then maybe you're willing to pay more for that brand if you think it's doing something really good, a social cause.
So the social impact of it is a part of what drives it forward.
Yeah, and when you look at examples like Tom's Shoes, when they went into the coffee business, they had a give back.
Oh, tell me about that. I didn't know about that.
Yeah, I don't know if they're still. I'm pretty sure they're still out there doing that. But they worked with. So when I worked for Allegro Coffee and Whole
Which
Foods,
time?
Essentially, last time. Yeah.
I love your resume. It was so fun to read your resume.
Oh God, yeah. They we toll roasted for Tom's.
Okay.
So we had the account, and when we started to understand the program, we saw immediate a product that was not on the shelf that all of a sudden within a year was on the shelf at Whole Foods had garnered a pretty good following because people knew the brand because of the loyalty they had with Tom's Shoes. And then when they found out, for every bag of coffee, you're supporting, fresh, clean water in these communities for a month for a family. They could do a calculator to kind of show you, like, if I buy this bag of coffee, I'm directly impacting this. And these coffees they definitely were specialty grade. But why couldn't that be a program that Nestle does?
Why can't it be?
Why can't it? And that it just seems to be smart. I know some of the large chocolate companies are starting to look at some of this kind of give back, but this should just be commonplace. And it is a commercial opportunity for these companies to actually put real money behind it in the product, not to say we're going to give to Rainforest Alliance or we're going to give to Conservation International. I think that's great. I think what Conservation International is doing with Starbucks and other companies and the sustainability, kind of movement that they're doing is great because it's self-reporting what you're paying for your coffee. But put it into the actual price of the coffee, put it into the communication direct to consumer. I'm sure somebody is doing it, but I just think the bigger companies are missing an opportunity to educate the consumer at that level and learn a little bit about what we're doing in specialty and saying, it's just like the microbrew industry. I mean, the big beer companies weren't really fascinated with specialty beer or, whatever.
IPAs and whatnot.
Yeah, and now they're like, wow, this is a financially viable business model. So, this is what I think hopefully will keep happening. I think that's what the fair trade movement was trying to do. I think Paul Rice was figuring out that, if we can try to go after the big companies and get them to support fair trade, but let's work with the companies that want to work with us and see how they do. And that model is proved to work pretty well for them. I don't know if it's moved the needle enough. I think it's a social cause and not an economic driver, like embedded within the company itself. But yeah, the money discussion is, like the example that you said of the producer that, how do I make this work? And, when people are saying maybe you should consider not growing coffee, that's a sad, kind of admission that maybe this isn't going to be it isn't sustainable. I mean, as it is now, because she's obviously challenged to keep everything working. And so.
Well, it isn't sustainable. Like the number of green buyers that that have conversations with me, and they are facing very difficult conversations with producers when producers are saying, I need you to pay me more because it doesn't make sense for me anymore to grow coffee.
Mm-hmm.
And those green buyers are in a rock and a hard place because, well, from the kinds of people that I'm speaking to, have integrity. So I know that they're not paying, shit prices and they're trying to screw anyone over. But the situation that they're finding themselves in is kind of really difficult because, they can't increase their prices. Their consumers won't pay anymore for the cups of coffee that they're already paying for. And producers are saying, but I'm not even able to cover my costs.
Right. Yeah. It's not even a break-even situation.
It's not even a break-even for me. Cafes are running at, around 3%, and then they have to pay tax on that to the government because that's their net. Like, where, coming back full circle, where does this go?
Yeah, I mean, I think the only, I guess, leverage that producers have is to find markets that are willing to pay more, but how much more to get into the profitability part of that equation and quickly. It's not like you can wait 6-7 years and hold out for this kind of. This is like month to month kind of stuff. So,
and
day
that's
to day.
The part that doesn't make sense. So when people have this conversation with me, they're like, well, these producers just need to get into specialty. I'm like, you look at families like Lamastas, like how, and their conversation on this podcast was fascinating. When Wilford Jr. and Wilford Sr. came on and they talked about the fact that it took them, they had to sell a farm. They got so close to going broke. The depths of debt and almost going out of business that they had to get to in order to get to where they are now to be one of the highest selling coffees in the world. It took decades.
Yeah. And I have friends that are farmers that have been part of the COE program that have told me I'm not profitable at all. But the recognition is, but you are a well-known farmer that everyone in the world knows you and you're a success story. She's like, no, there are other ways that I make money consulting.
Revenues, over the revenue streams.
Yeah, and I can't give up my farm, but I have the opportunity to have other revenue streams, and the other 95% of those producers out there don't. They don't have another business to lean on in when the C market's low. So that shocked me to know someone that I've known a long time that said, no, it's not draining my account, but I'm not actually profitable. And I'm like, you mean all those years you weren't profitable? Nope. I really wasn't, but it helped me to get, and actually being part of CUE and winning it helped this person to actually, have other economic opportunities. Yeah. And obviously as a skilled farmer, I'm able to go out and teach other farmers how to do a job and get paid for that. That's actually, I guess, one of the success stories. Although to me, it was sad to know that actual farm, that one COE, is not making any money. And that's just shocking that, but it's a family thing. I can't let go of it. I want it to just be, it's like a family member. You just don't want to let go of it just because it's not just a business. It's actually a way of living. It's a way of being. And, you're willing to take those risks. And I think there are thousands of farmers that are in that same situation where they probably, if they were wearing their economic hat, they'd be like, no,
pack it in tomorrow.
Get rid of it. Yeah.
This is that cultural difference that I was kind of trying to tap into is they don't want to talk about money in a way that makes it quite clear for us to understand that they're not making any money.
Right.
It's difficult for people to admit, and I'm not saying this is just at the producer level, because I know many cafe owners that I go in and consult for that they're like, we've never made a cent.
Yeah.
Like, why have you been operating for 4 years and you haven't made a cent? And they're like, now got to the point where we've drained all our life savings and we don't know what to do.
Wow.
Now, so it happens across the board. And I think that, this is a much bigger discussion about the barrier to entry and the fact that we have no kind of way for teaching leadership and, bookkeeping and financial management. There's no requirement on that for you to become a coffee producer or for you to become a cafe owner or a roastery owner or any of those things.
Right.
We as an industry would definitely benefit if we had some standards and requirements that you had to fulfill and prove that you had learnt about before you're allowed to go into business. But that's not okay either.
Right.
I'm a libertarian in that sense, in that
Mm-hmm.
you should be able to do whatever the fuck you want with the resources that you have. As long as you don't hurt anybody, go for it. And let's hope that you do well. But I'm also an advocate for how do we conspire to producing more successful businesses? How do we give more people a fighting chance? And so I'm not saying don't go into business. What I would like for more people to do is to be better prepared before they go into business. And that's why, we're trying to do what we can to provide the workshops that are required for that. But going back to my point, I think a lot of the producers, we're finding out too late that they have done it tough for too long.
Yeah.
And we're starting to understand the dire consequences of that, given the coffee price crisis. And that's that stress test that I was talking about. I think that it's now it's exposing a much deeper, darker situation that we have where they're saying, you know what, we carried this burden for too long. We've got nothing left.
Yeah. Yeah. And, the last, I think, coffee crisis of sustained periods of time in the past, and not just coffee, but other industries. I think about Peru and the cooperative movement, which kind of came out of, the cooperative movement in Peru started as a response against private companies that were monopoly. They were monopolizing their interests. So the co-ops thought, well, if we grow coffee together or other products together, we'll be more profitable together. We'll have more power and more structure.
Right.
And Nicaragua experienced the same thing. El Salvador at one point, had many, many cooperatives. And I literally think there's one cooperative left in El Salvador. So that was a lifeline at one point, and it could be a lifeline again for, washing stations in Rwanda and Burundi are essentially kind of cooperatively structured. And these are tools. Those are instruments for change. And the same thing would be true for companies that want to be employee owned, where, everybody's a shareholder in the company. We're stronger together to weather competition or weather increases in prices of products that we have to buy. And how many cooperatively owned cafes are there in the U.S. right now? I can't even name any. And I'm not saying that that's going to solve all the problems, but there's a reason why there was a cooperative movement in natural foods and, those types of programs like, hey, we can get healthy food and we can get it at an affordable price if we just become unionized in a way.
Right.
And that's why unions started, and so I think, those are ways, whether they've actually, again, moved the needle or not, but it's better than just saying, I waited too long. I had no lifeline. And now it is too late. So I wonder if that might end up becoming a model that might work, on more on the roaster retail side too. If it gets to the point where that 3% margin or 2% margin becomes no margin, then you quickly either sell out and get bought up by somebody bigger, which the consolidation is.
That's a trendy thing right now.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen so much consolidation. Right. And there's a reason why that's happening, because those companies either were not profitable or one person that owned it or a group of people that owned it decided to cash out. But if it was economically really viable, they probably would have stayed in the game.
That's why you're seeing co-roasting facilities starting to pop up. It's a much better option to go and co-roast than having to have the capital investment, right?
Yep, exactly. Yep, yeah. And it makes complete sense. So I guess that's a cooperative.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
In a sense, I mean, you may not have shares in it, but you're essentially a member of Pulley, or you're a member of, whatever companies that are
California
out there doing
Roasting Company that just opened up here in San Diego.
it. Oh, nice.
Steady State Roasting just opened their own cooperative, calling it California Co-Roasting Facility. And it's because there are a lot of roasters that are just finding it too difficult to, the zoning laws on their own are so difficult to navigate that they're like, well, we're going to get a really big space. It's going to be able to facilitate a lot of people. You pay a fee, you come and do it, and you don't have to worry about the city permits or anything like that. We've taken care of all of it on your behalf. That seems to be the way that future business is going to have to go. I mean, for Elixir, we use a commercial kitchen because it's just too hard, and a lot of businesses are going that way now.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely, we see it here in the U.S. and Australia. I've seen a couple more recent companies providing the same. I think there's a company in Sydney that's doing the same. Maybe there are many. I don't know, but it's. I mean, the overhead to open a roastery and maintain a staff and a facility, and it really is, and thus the consolidation. So yeah.
Have you heard of the program that La Palma El Tucán in Colombia are doing with regards to something similar to this? I think they're calling it Coffee and Neighbors, something similar to that. This program, what they're doing is they are obviously a very successful coffee producer in Colombia, and they have a very successful and highly capable picking team. So what they do for the neighboring farms, and we're about to release one of these coffees for Elixir, is they say to the farms, you grow the coffee and we will bring our team in to come and do all the picking. And they do that in neighboring farms around them. So there's this program that they will train the people and they will go in and do the picking, and they have some sort of an economic arrangement there. But I think you might be onto something with that idea of the future of the way that we do business across the value chain in coffee is going to have, if we're going to be able to have any kind of shot at sustainability, is more a cooperative kind of approach and working together, whether it be at the producer level, the roasting level, even the importing level. I think that's going to become more affordable if people can start importing together and doing that on. I know that there are a lot of companies that do that, but the smaller guys are going to have a better chance of doing it if they start getting in on that. And as well at the roastery and the cafe level, buying coffees together and doing all that kind of thing, sharing stuff. Who knows? 2030 is going to be a very interesting. Let's not wait until then to have another conversation. I'm hoping you come back pretty regularly, but we're definitely having a conversation in 2030, you and I.
Let's do it.
Thanks so much for your time, Darrin. It's been an absolute pleasure. And thank you so much for the standard of integrity that you set as a coffee professional is something that I really admire. So thank you for what you bring, not only as an organization, but you as a professional. It's really inspiring.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. It was a blast. Really fun. So
2 hours goes past pretty quickly, doesn't it?
It does. Let's do it again.
And let's do it again soon. I'll talk to you soon, mate.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.